All right. Hi, everybody. I am here with Dr. Danielle Greenman. Dr. Greenman is a functional and integrative medicine doctor in Stanford. And also you're working virtually with patients right now, right?
Yeah, so coronavirus was actually an interesting shift. In one way, it allowed me to access patients from a much broader geographical area. And so there's lots you can do virtually over the phone in terms of understanding a patient's story and thinking of game plans and analyzing poop, which we'll talk about. And then, you can't do a hands-on physical exam, which is so much of what we do, and certainly some of the other modalities get lost. But right now we're doing both.
Awesome. Yeah, so today we are going to get to poop in a second, but first I would love for you to explain a little bit about why people would go to an integrative doctor versus their regular MD, because it is something I think is being recommended a lot more, but I'm not sure that there's a total understanding of what the difference is.
Yeah, great question. So I think to start, I see a future where every traditional MD has some kind of integrative and holistic training so that we actually don't need to have the dichotomy between go see your integrative physician or go see your primary care. Like, I believe that there will be a day when you have MDs who are trained as part of a traditional medical school and residency curriculum that incorporates integrative. And so what is integrative? So it takes everything that you think about your traditional MD, meaning your physiology, your anatomy, your biochemistry. And on top of that, it integrates your mind, your body, and your spirit. So how does your environment and your social engagements and your food and your nutrition and your hormones, how does that all play into your overall well-being and the manifestation of disease or illness? And how can you use or apply understanding to your lifestyle and your patterns of thinking, and how much you move or how much you don't move and how much you sleep towards the treatment plan, in addition to the traditional toolbox of pharmaceuticals plus or not nutraceuticals plus diet. And so it's kind of looking broad spectrum of what's going on from a very bird's eye view, as opposed to system based, which is I either look at your gut or I look at your hormones or I look at your kidneys. And then I think functional medicine takes parts of integrative medicine, but it really looks at how your cells and how your biological processes function, right? How they work, and break it down to the core. And so I think functional medicine really got down to how the building blocks of your body work, and has recently started expanded into more of some of the integrative approach. So really bringing in that mind, body, spirit component as well. And so I like to think of it as a Venn diagram of internal medicine or traditional medicine, functional medicine, and integrative medicine. And then you have me in the middle.
I love that. I mean, and that's part of the reason why we have some collaboration on some patients, and
Yeah,
it's powerful what you do, because you do look at all of the different ways that we can help someone.
thank
Uh,
you. You
which
do.
yeah, so that which is the goal. And I love that you said hopefully that is the future of medicine and nutrition and wellness all together.
Yeah.
This week we talked a little bit about integrative nutrition and a little bit about gut health, very basically. But what from your perspective, we love talking about poop and want to normalize that in a big way. So what's normal? Because I'm sure people come in with all sorts of different bodily function, like habits, basically.
Yeah, absolutely. It's amazing how if you look from the beginning of life, when a child is born, we talk and think about their poop so much because it tells us so much about how they're digesting their food, and how their overall health is, what color their stool is, what consistency their stool is. But then there's a point in life where somehow we are conditioned to stop. talking about that. And so what is normal is maybe one bowel movement per day, maybe every, pretty much every day. If you can have up to 2 and have that be normal as well. And some people don't go every day. If you're going every 2 to 3 days, that's okay too, as long as you're not feeling discomfort with that. And you really want your poops to look like a log or a snake. So it shouldn't be very difficult to have a bowel movement. But if it is, then we should look into that. If the stool is mushy or loose, then we want to think about what's going on. Or if the stool looks like little pebbles, then we want to think about what's going on too. So there's a stool chart. It's called the Bristol stool chart. And I really like going over that with patients. It gives you a breakdown from 1 to 7. Ranging from that pebble to that that mush, and somewhere in the middle is where we want to be.
Yeah, actually, we had shared that earlier in the week, so people are familiar with that.
That is on my desk, laminated.
Yay! I'm so glad it's Dr. Greenman approved, because it's really important. Yeah, and if that happens, it's like a one-off. It's on one range or the other, probably not an issue. But on that note, when is something an issue between? I have patients come in a lot with chronic bloat. Sorry, I'm having some dog franticness behind me.
I have a 3-year-old who forgot to take a bath. If you hear the running water, I apologize about that too.
Yeah, so when is stuff like bloat, chronic constipation, diarrhea, or even like just pain, whether it's reflux, anywhere along the digestive tract, when is it worth sort of like looking further into?
Yeah, I think your point is having a one-off makes sense, right? So if you're someone who, anything that is, when it feels normal to not feel normal, right? That's, to me, time to go see someone. So if you eat a lot of vegetables and you're a person who bloats, that's not abnormal, right? But if you have the question ever, is this normal? That is why your healthcare team is there for you, because there's a lot of medicine and healing in someone saying, yeah, you don't need to worry about that. And taking that off your plate, because we have enough going on in the world and with our health and our bodies to worry about. But pain is never normal, right? So if you're having regular bouts of pain in the stomach or with bowel movements, either before or after, that is something that you should ask for help for. If you're noticing mucus or blood in your stool, those are also things that are not what we would call kind of red flag symptoms. If you notice that there are, let's say if there's like oil in your stool, so right, but not just a one-off, but regularly, then that's something to go to your doctor about, because then we're thinking, okay, if things are oily, maybe you have a problem with fat digestion and we need to look at your pancreatic enzymes. And so we just kind of need to look broadly.
That's great advice. And so so a lot of people are in the Nutrition Club this summer, specifically focusing on weight loss, and with the understanding that weight loss is sort of a byproduct of living a really healthy life and getting sort of all the puzzle pieces in order first. So what does gut health have to do with that, from your opinion?
So I think from my personal opinion and from an evidence-based standpoint, your gut health has a lot to do with your ability to metabolize your food. And we can look at it again from a multi-pronged approach. The one way I love to kind of simplify it is if you look at the cattle industry or the red meat industry, cows are given lots of antibiotics. And we think, or some of the kind of general theory is that cows are given antibiotics so that they don't get infections, so that we can have more prevalent, more healthy, quote unquote, healthy livestock. But the truth is, the reason they give antibiotics to the cattle is because they realize that it fattens them up in the end of their life.
Wow.
And so we are the same. And the way it does that is by changing the gut microbiome. And so what is the microbiome, right? So the microbiome is this population of bugs that we live this symbiotic life with, that helps us digest and absorb food. But it doesn't just do that, it also helps regulate our metabolism in that it changes our estrogen levels. It changes and helps regulate our thyroid function, which is a big driver of kind of your metabolic, we call it the basal metabolic rate. So if I'm sitting here, how many calories an hour I burn, just by having my body function the way it normally functions. And so gut health is basically equivalent to the population of your microbiome, and the microbiome helps regulate your metabolism.
Wow, that's so interesting. So should everyone be on probiotics then? Or, I mean, we've talked about fermented food big time this week also. So we know like that's number one ideally. But what are your thoughts on probiotics and switching them up?
So I think probiotics are a really great question, and one where there's still a big question mark, right? So there's a lot of data coming out, and we're studying this new field of the gut microbiome, right? So how it relates to your mental health and how it relates to your physical health, and in this case, your metabolic health. And the truth is, we don't have a flat yes or a flat no. So I think in general, it's something that you can try. It won't hurt, might help. So, but we don't know how to target with evidence yet what probiotics to take. So I think when there's abnormalities or irregularities, probiotics are a great part of the healing process. And then I think making sure we change it up pretty frequently if we choose to stay on a probiotic. But I personally don't have patients stay on probiotics forever, because I'm hopeful that their diet, once they get to healthy snake log-like poops, their diet is so diverse that with fiber-rich foods and fermented foods, they're able to sustain a healthy gut microbiome on their own. And then maybe we can do short courses, but again, that's kind of just my personal style and not much data driving that decision, because the science hasn't caught up to the clinical application of the science hasn't caught up to what we're learning about the microbiome. But I think we're like about to have lots of breakthroughs. There's a lot of cool studies coming out of actually Australia. And I can't remember if it was Dr. Kara Fitzgerald or Dr. Aviva Ram, who had a podcast with a specialist on the microbiome and probiotics. That was really kind of worth checking out.
Amazing. Okay, I'll definitely make a note of that one too. So thanks for mentioning that. So I have a feeling what you're going to say for my last question for you based on that. But what do you think of those at-home sort of what I call shit kits, like Biome or Biome? There's tons of them now that are like $150, and you do a little swab of poop and send it off, and they give you a rundown of your bacteria.
I think they're really interesting, and I think what you're paying for. So some of them give you clinical application, like your pancreatic enzymes and your digestion and the amount of fecal fat, which can be clinically make changes, right? We can, we call it intellectual data, right? We can get that data and we can intervene or have an intervention that might change the course of how you're feeling. But in general, we have no idea. For most of us, we have no idea what to do with that data, but it also might tell us, hey, you have a really unhealthy diversity in your gut microbiome, or you have a lot of overgrowth of XYZ in your microbiome. So I really don't think that it makes sense to do it without the guidance of a functional dietitian or a functional physician, someone who can kind of guide you about what to do, or else you just have a test and you have no idea how to interpret it. It's just kind of, gives you what the norms and what correlations are. And I think patients get really confused because a lot of times those tests come back and say like XYZ bacteria is associated with inflammatory bowel disease or depression, and we confuse correlation with causation. So we think, oh my God, I must be depressed because my microbiome is off, as opposed to, is there some relationship, correlation between my gut bacteria being off and my depression? And why is and then if you think about the correlation, so the relationship, you then think about, well, why would my gut bacteria be out of balance? And then you start getting one level deeper, which is that root cause, which is, what are you eating? Have you been exposed to antibiotics? Do you take lots of ibuprofen or eating food or exposed to environmental toxins? So we can really get one step deeper. So I think the tests are going to be great. I think we're at the verge of having a ton of information that will be usable, but we're not there. And essentially what you're doing, and this is my opinion, is you're selling your data so that we can start learning more about poop, right? Because the tests are so cheap because they're using that stool test for research, which is great,
Yeah.
but we should know what we're doing.
Wow. That is fascinating. That has definitely never occurred to me. So mine is already part of that collection data.
I mean, it's the same thing with 23andMe. I mean, but there's nothing wrong with that. It's just data collection.
Yeah. Cool. Wow. Okay. This has been so informative as always with you. Thank you so much. Anything else that you think that we've left out about things that are great? I mean, we've talked a lot about the foods that are great for digestion, fermented foods, and a couple of supplements that can help with regularity, but anything else that you can think of?
No, I mean, there's so much in terms of how to regulate your poop. And I think you and I could probably talk 90 minutes on how to do that. But I think the broad picture is what's normal and what's not normal, and when to see someone to help guide you through, because there are so many interventions to normalize your poop. And it is not normal to feel sick and tired and abnormal. And so if those are things that you're feeling, then we can do something about it.
Yeah, and I would love for you to add to this. Poop is literally getting rid of toxins from our body and estrogen, and you feel
100%.
so much better when you're going regularly. And it really shouldn't be gross because it's a health behavior.
Yeah, absolutely. You're sweating it out, you're peeing it out, and you're pooping it out. So that's why movement is so important, hydration is so important, and making sure your bowels are moving regularly is so important.
Thank you for all of your wisdom and time. You're so wonderful. Appreciate you. I'll share all of your information too with everyone so they can, if they wanted to book a session, know where to.
Great.
Thank you.